Hello once again, witchy people. Welcome back to my Covenstead, and I apologise for the lighting. So, I wanted to... Hello, Barclay. I wanted to tell you something that happened yesterday, but first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of history about my house. So, I live in a semi-detached house, end of terrace, in a normal suburban location. It's an ex-council house, so it used to be a local council-owned property. It was built probably in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and it was a prefab, what they call a prefab. So it was a concrete house built of concrete slabs. After the war, so that there would be enough housing stock to house all the people coming back and making families. So that's basically the history of the house. Only two families have ever lived in this house, and that's the original people who lived here, who was the Coop family. Sarah Coop, her husband and her children. Her husband died in this house, I think sometime in the 80s. And I think she had 7 children here, 5 or 7. And the only other family that's lived there has been mine for the past 16, 17 years. 17. It's quite a while. It might be coming on 20 years. I'm not very good with time. Anyway, so that's roughly the history of the house. Not a great deal. I know it was farmland before, but then again, most of the area was. There's still quite a lot of farmland close by, small farms and small holdings. So there, that's it. So yesterday, my son came down to cook me a Japanese curry, which was absolutely lovely. It was a late birthday present, and I was pottering in and out of the kitchen. Now, we do have quite a lot of people living here. So there are 5 adults living here, plus my son comes to visit. The 5 adults are obviously me, my husband, my youngest daughter and her partner, and my eldest daughter, because they all need somewhere to work from home, and this is a bubble. We are our own little bubble. So my eldest daughter was working. She was locked away in the dining room where she basically lives. My youngest daughter was out. Her partner was away at work. My husband was at work, which just left really me and my son in and out of the kitchen. Now, my son had his boots on whilst he was making my curry. This is important. I know it seems a weird thing to say, but it's important. I would also like to add that I have the smallest feet in my house. That's important too. So there we were. Me flitting in and out the kitchen occasionally, but kind of letting him get on with it. And he with his boots on in my kitchen. So I went in to make myself a drink. And I made myself a drink. And I was just walking out the kitchen in my bare feet, and I noticed footprints on the floor. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why would there be wet footprints on the floor? No one had been in the kitchen except for me and my son. No one else had been in the kitchen for a good half an hour, quite a while. So no one else had been in the kitchen, and my feet weren't wet. I hadn't trodden anything to make... I mean, there were a few little water droplets on the floor where my son had been doing the washing up after he'd been preparing this meal for me. But there was no pools of water on the floor where you could get a whole footprint on the floor, a wet footprint. So I put my foot up next to this wet footprint, and it was not my footprint. It was smaller than my footprint. It was a different shape. It was much, because at the moment I'm, as with some other witches, walking wisteria. Brittany, poor thing, she's on the same medication as me. It swells your ankles, it swells your feet, it's absolutely awful. So, you know, this, even though my feet maybe were slightly swollen, they weren't, you know, hadn't changed in the past hour or so. But it was a different shape. Hello, Barclay. The footprint was very much the toe sort of like started off at quite a point and went down at quite an angle, and it was a very thin foot and a small foot, very small footprint. So I took a photograph of my foot next to the footprint, and there was about an inch difference in size. My foot was bigger, and as I said, I have the smallest feet in our house. So this footprint appeared from nowhere, a wet footprint where there was no pools of water on the floor to make a wet footprint. And I just stood there watching it slowly disappear, amazed at these. There was actually a few, but there was one full footprint and then several little bits of footprints. Yes, a whole footprint of nobody that lives in this house appeared on my kitchen floor. And I thought that was quite interesting because then, you know, this house hasn't got a huge history, and I just thought it was really strange and ever so slightly spooky. We tried to think of some explanations, perhaps that it was my footprint and that it had been evaporating and getting smaller, you know, the water had been evaporating off. But as I said, it was a different shape to my footprint, and the footprint appeared whilst I was in the room, or round about there. So really it didn't, you know, it was a full wet footprint. It didn't have time to start evaporating. It was really, really strange. And it was a different shape to my foot. So yeah, I found it quite intriguing. My youngest daughter hates to hear about it. She's like, don't talk about it. I don't want to know. We have had a few weird things happen in the house, but not sort of evidence of something quite strange. I did take a photograph of my foot next to the footprint, and you can see it is different. My poor swollen feet and ankles. I have cankles. I have no ankles anymore. But yeah, so, and I thought I'd share because it was just the strangest little thing to happen. Like I said, we've had a lot of weird things happen in this house. That's just one in a long line. But it was quite interesting, and I love it when weird things happen. So there you go. I will be doing an update very soon, so stay tuned, and I'll be back very soon. Thank you for listening to my little story, witchy people. I'll be back very soon. Bye for now.